What you are about to read will completely change the way you look at Martin. A terrifying secret, a twist that makes everything collapse in just a few minutes. Martin never thought that the past could rise up so fiercely and brutally. But everything has started to spin in his mind from the moment the wheels slowly rolled on the old road, bringing him back to the place he once called home. The air is thick with the humidity of suffocation and the smell of dead memories. Martin clearly feels the layers of time dust gradually covering his heart, step by step, pulling him towards the abyss where conscience and survival instinct collide to the point of bleeding. It is a painful return, a journey that seems harmless but contains hidden dangers, hidden under the fake peaceful shell of this seemingly familiar countryside. No one can predict what will happen when the past, prejudice and violence converge in a single moment. And Martin is the victim of all of that when faced with the awakening from the hidden darkness in the society and people around him. On the way back, when the car stopped in the middle of a deserted and gloomy road with two sides of silent fields, Martin could not have imagined that fate was waiting for him in the form of two strange men, appearing from the darkness with cold eyes and vulgar language. Words filled with contempt and racism rained down on him like knives tearing apart the self-esteem of a person who already had many wounds in his heart. Martin tried to stay calm, hoped to ignore, walk away, and stay away from that cheap and spiteful provocation, but the hatred of the strangers did not stop at words. A strong push sent him falling to the cold, rocky ground. Two men rushed forward, one grabbed his shirt, the other pulled out an iron bar from the back of the car, the metal glinting in the dim light like an omen of an inevitable disaster. Martin's fear was not evident on his face but in every rapid breath, every tense, suffocating movement. He knew they didn't just want to beat him, they wanted to destroy him. Make him disappear as if his existence was a dirty thing that shouldn't exist in their world. And at that moment, when the survival instinct overwhelmed all moral and rational boundaries, Martin reacted like a cornered animal. He jumped up, snatching the crowbar from the attacker's hand. Blood splattered as he swung the iron bar with all his strength and the desperate panic of a man who had only one choice left between life and death. The first man collapsed to the ground with a dry sound, his head hitting the cement floor, blood spreading on the floor like a wound that would never heal. Before the other man could retreat, another blow came down, shattering everything inside him. There was no time to think, no chance to choose. Martin was left with only numbness in his hand that was still tightly gripping the crowbar heavy with human blood. The scene before his eyes made his heart pound, his mind reel, and his soul felt like it was being torn apart by the invisible screams echoing from the two corpses lying motionless on the ground. Martin didn't remember how long he had stood there, only knowing that everything around him gradually sank into deathly silence. There were no witnesses, no one intervened, only him and the sin that had just formed in that moment filled with despair. He knew he was no longer the same person, knew that from that moment, he had crossed a threshold from which no one could turn back. And that weighed on his shoulders all the way after that, like an invisible wound, like a curse. But it was not until Martin met Smitty again, when the past could no longer be endured and was forced to come out of his mouth like a haunting release, that he truly faced his own dark nature. Martin revealed to Smitty, with a trembling voice and eyes clouded by the horror of memory, that the two lives taken at his hands were not out of hatred, but out of fear, because of the ultimate push of a man tired of being driven away from the very place he once believed he could belong. It was not a simple act of self-defense, but a collision of history, of hatred, of generational prejudices that had accumulated into a blade, forcing Martin to act in that bloody chaos. And that truth, once spoken, changed everything. It was not just a confession, but a sentence that fell on Martin's life, plunging him into a darkness deeper than any prison had ever existed. From then on, Martin was no longer a victim or a survivor, he became a symbol of the naked and terrifying truth, that in a world where evil is cloaked in power and discrimination, the line between victim and perpetrator can be erased in a single heartbeat of panic. And as Martin recounted that story, every detail, every drop of blood, every look of the dying man remained in his mind like a permanent ghost. None of them could ever return to their old selves. Not Martin, not Smitty. No one could forget the moment the truth was revealed like a knife, tearing apart all the last illusions of fairness in this life. Martin thought that after pouring out all the truth, Some of the burden would disappear, but he was wrong. The nightmare had only just begun. His confession brought him no relief, but a chain of unimaginable consequences. What Martin did not expect was that the two men he had thought dead were not strangers. They were the younger brothers of a high-ranking police officer who had been disciplined for abuse of power. A man who had a deep hatred for anyone with Martin's skin color. When the news leaked, a real hell opened. Not only was Martin pursued by the law, but he also became the target of those who wanted personal revenge. The eyes following him in the dark, the strange cars appearing in front of his house. The anonymous phone calls in the middle of the night made Martin gradually lose his mind. He did not know who was on his side, did not know how long Smitty could keep the secret. And then, as Martin tries to pack up to leave town once more, he discovers an envelope quietly slipped through the crack in his door. Inside is a photo of himself from that night. His hands still stained with blood, and a short but cold note like a knife: "We know who you are. You will not escape." Martin trembles, his hands dropping the photo, his eyes darkening. There is nowhere to go, no one to trust, and the past is no longer just a haunting but a death sentence hanging over his head. Once the truth is revealed, it can never be buried again. All doors to salvation have been slammed shut in Martin's face. And in a world where justice is twisted by hatred and power, the survivors are not the innocent, they are the ones who know how to run the longest. But does Martin have enough time to run? Or is he just counting down the seconds until hell finally swallows him up? To make sure you don't miss out on the next breathless episode, be sure to follow and subscribe to our channel today. Martin's nightmare is just beginning, and the darkest secrets are still waiting to be revealed.